Love it or hate it, I think it's safe to say that Yonge Street is the most interesting street in the city of Toronto. And hey everyone, it is, what day is it? Saturday, October 7th. The time is 3:08 p.m. and the temperature is rather cool, 12 degrees Celsius. Which is considerably cooler than it's been over the past several days. We've had a streak of summer-like weather come to an end. And this is the intersection of Yonge and Bloor, right at the north end of downtown. And for this one, I'll be doing something I've done a number of times on this channel. Let's go for a walk down Yonge Street. There's the Yorkville neighborhood off in the distance. This was not the walk that I intended on recording. I was making my way south from Eglinton Station up at Yonge and Eglinton to Bloor Yonge Station, and I came out of those doors there. And it took about 15 minutes longer than it should have, and I'm on a bit of a tight schedule. So rather than make the walk that I had planned on doing, we're going to go from Yonge and Bloor maybe down to Queen or King Street. And as I was waiting for a delay at Davisville Station, a delay that was not announced on the subway train, or if they did, it was too quiet and garbled to be understood, I found an article by BlogTO called 10 Strange and Unusual Things You Might Not Know About Yonge Street. And that was published on March 26, 2022. So if I remember to, I'll link that in the description, but I'll take some inspiration from that one on the things I talk about on this walk. And one of the items mentioned on that list is that before Yorkville became the city's hub for live music in the 1960s, Yonge Street was the city's sonic capital. It says that the Yonge Street strip was alive with taverns and hotels and live music venues. And that, for the most part, has gone by the wayside. Yorkville being just north of here, which is no longer a hub of live music either. But in the 60s, it kind of became hippie central. And from Yonge and Bloor down to the lake, it's about 3.3 kilometers. So I'll be sprinkling in some facts of my own throughout this one. And it divides the city, or at least the downtown area, into east and west. Everything on my left is to the east, and on the right is west. For instance, Charles Street here, if you turn left, you're on Charles Street East. And if you turn right, you're on Charles Street West. With a few exceptions, that's generally the naming convention applied. On this channel, I think this is the street I've recorded the most. Okay. But to my surprise, the last time I did a day walk on this stretch of Yonge Street was back in May. In my mind, I thought it was sooner than that. This is a very common sight on Yonge Street these days. A lot of the retail being being boarded up as the block gets prepared to turn into condos. And another fact from that Blog TO article is something I've talked about, but contrary to popular belief, Yonge Street is not the longest street in the world. It's actually the Pan American Highway, which I think I once read is around 30,000 kilometers long. Well, that can't be right. 30 kilometers wrong? 30,000 kilometers. That pretty much cover around the globe. There's a brain fart for you. But Yonge Street itself is not linked with Highway 11. And when people say it's the longest street in the world, they're counting Yonge Street and Highway 11 as one, which is incorrect. And according to that article, it is not the longest street in the world, but it is probably the oldest street in Toronto. Dates back to 1794, when the Queen's Rangers carved out the route at the direction of John Graves Simcoe. And I remember looking him up in the past. If memory holds out, he was a British Army general and the first Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada. Paramedic SUV is flying. And I think that's the board from the movie Short Circuit up on the side of the Church of Scientology building. While the city definitely needs more housing and a major subway corridor like Yonge Street's a great place for it and a logical place, I can't say I'm a fan of the new retail in these condos. This just looks so much more sterile than what you get across the street. I think they could have done a better job of maintaining the type of retail. They certainly did across the street there at that condo. But you'll notice instead of small mom and pop type retailers, you get a large coffee chain and a bank as tenants, which is sucking a lot of the life and character out of Yonge Street. That's something I've talked about in prior videos. There's a new entrance to Wellesley Station. I don't think that one's open yet on Dundonald Street. Speaking of which, Wellesley Street is coming up. On the left, we'll find Wellesley Station, where another fact, or that brings me to another fact in that Blog TO article. As some more fire trucks race up Yonge Street. Oh, they're turning off. That was that we tend to think of line 1 of the subway as running directly underneath Yonge Street. That's really just the short stretch between King and College stations. For the most part downtown, the subway is on the east side of Yonge Street. I guess the fire got extinguished. This is Wellesley Street. There's Wellesley Station off to the east side. This is the only station on this side of line 1 downtown that only has an entrance on the east side. But the subway does cross over to the west side as you get up towards Davisville Station, as it's above ground for that stretch. But when you're south of College between King and you're on the sidewalk standing on some grates, you'll often hear the subway rattle as it makes its way up and down Yonge.
That was a touchdown.
There are just non-stop sirens today. Another fire truck is making its way north. Mentioned John Graves Simcoe before. He's actually behind the name of the street. Just wait for this emergency vehicle to pass by. And he named it after his friend Sir George Yonge. And he served as Britain's Secretary of War. Here's another example of good retail on one side of the street. And not exciting retail on the other, although the tenants haven't moved in. The storefronts are certainly kind of bland and generic looking. Something is going on up there. And I think there's a rally making its way north up Yonge here. Someone who's either recording it or live streaming his walk. The street is the old St. Charles Tavern. Clock there for the fire hall that used to be there was built in 1870 as part of Toronto Fire Hall number 3.
Thanks everyone for your support! Trudeau must go!
Trudeau must go!
And that was once the center of Toronto's gay community, the St. Charles Tavern. And that was where the first iteration of what later became the Pride Parade happened. Every Halloween in the 60s and 70s, it says drag queens and queers would strut along the street, often being pelted with eggs by a homophobic mob. I just wanted to bring this up while I was standing in front of it. The size of that rally, which has been a regular occurrence for years, is getting smaller and smaller, it seems. There's Dickie's Barbecue Pit, which is supposed to be pretty good. I've yet to try it. There's an RC coffee kiosk. I wonder if that's really just like a glorified Keurig, which ironically is on the spot of where a very large Second Cup cafe used to be. There's a Chucky. It's a Halloween-themed Hummer. And this is Yonge and College coming up. College on the right, Carleton on the left. And here you'll find College Station and the 506 Carleton streetcar. Runs east-west along this route. There's College Park, formerly a flagship Eaton's department store. And this is that stretch where the subway runs directly underneath Yonge Street. That construction on the right is for the installation of an elevator leading down to the southbound platform. And once that is done, it'll shift over to this side of the street and they'll make the northbound platform accessible. And speaking of subway stations, on this side of Line 1, there's 6 subway stations along Yonge Street. King, Queen, and Dundas, College, Wellesley, and Bloor-Yonge. There's College Park across the street. What is, at least for now, the tallest residential building in the country, Aura. It'll lose that title next year. There's a number of taller residential buildings under construction right now in the city. There's a neat little Thanksgiving display over there. I did a live stream that started in College Park last night, and you can find that on the channel. I started here and I walked north all the way up to Yonge and Eglinton. And this is Gerrard Street coming up. So I'd say the most interesting and vibrant stretch of Yonge Street would be between Gerrard here and probably Queen. There's the urban format IKEA. And the former home of the Toronto Institution on this street corner, the Big Slice, which has made way for a new condo going up, Concord Sky. Look over towards the Chelsea Hotel. Speaking of taller buildings than Aura, this will be one of them on the left, although this one won't be done next year. It's a project that stalled for quite a while, and it changed developers. Queen used to be a Swiss chalet. That's a chain that's really gone downhill. I ordered it the other night, and it is a shell of its former self. It's also way more expensive than it used to be. There's Zanzibar, which I think is under the same ownership as the Brass Rail, another gentleman's club we walked by earlier on this one. This was an area in the 90s, 80s and 90s known for its arcades and music shops. Just on the left there used to be a Sam the Record Man with an iconic storefront. And a number of other music shops. Yonge Street also had a bit of a sleazy reputation back then. And the city tried to clean it up with Dundas Square coming up. There's the World Food Market on the left. I'm kind of surprised that this has held out so long and hasn't been developed into a building. I think there was a mention about Dundas Square in that article. Let me find it. It says, Yonge and Dundas Square was designed to rid the street of its remaining sleaze. Then Councillor Kyle Ray campaigned hard for the square as a means for a cleanup to Yonge Street. And in some cases it worked, and in some cases it didn't. We'll be passing by the square in a minute. There's an attraction I've yet to go to, Little Canada. I know Ken's done a few videos walking through there in the past. this area kind of paralleled Broadway in Times Square. It had a reputation for sleaze and all the kind of activities associated with that. It's always lively in that street corner over there with buskers and preachers and that sort of thing. There's Yonge and Dundas. And you can enter Dundas Square from all four corners of this intersection. And of course the Eaton Center across the street. Eaton Center being North America's busiest shopping mall. I mentioned Sam the Record Man earlier. There's its sign, which was put up, I believe, by then Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan University, as their Student Learning Center occupies the spot where Sam the Record Man once was. And this is the site of what billed itself as the world's largest jean store. I remember that building going up across the street there was pretty controversial in its own right. And it featured a large AMC 30 where some of the theaters doubled as classrooms for the university. But AMC has since gone under. Maybe it doesn't have 30 screens. It might be less than that. I'm thinking of one of the AMCs was 30. Either way, it's now a Cineplex Odeon. And this used to be a Hard Rock Cafe. Of course, it's a Shoppers Drug Mart. And speaking of blandification, there used to be a Samsung store right across the street in the mall. And that is turning into a BMO bank. I think that's kind of gross, personally. A major shopping center should be a big retailer in that spot, instead of a boring corporate entity like a bank. People are going to go to a bank anyways, no matter where it's located. There's the former Nordstrom's across the street, who pulled out of Canada last year.
Where Yonge and Dundas Square is the Eaton Center.
Oh, Steve!
On that side of the street, it says the demolition of the original Eaton's complex is the largest the city has ever seen. It involved over a dozen major buildings and took 2 years. And there was originally an Eaton's department store down at Yonge and Queen, which we'll be walking by, but that was demolished once the northern section of the mall was built. So they built the mall in 2 phases. There's the northern section, which featured an Eaton's department store that replaced the one to the south. That's where Nordstrom's took over. It became a Sears after Eaton's, and then it became a Nordstrom. Although some of the other levels were converted into regular retail. I've heard it said, I wasn't here at the time, I wasn't alive, but as welcome as the Eaton Center was and as nice as it was on the inside, it really apparently sucked the life out of Yonge Street in terms of removing a lot of interesting retail and bars and places for people to visit, and kind of just replaced it with a big blank wall that represented the mall. And you can see now the facade tries to mimic retail being on the sidewalk. But it's really just a facade. I think the east side of Yonge Street here is infinitely more interesting than what you see on the west side where the Eaton Center is. And this is Shooter Street. And here's one I've talked about before. Lower Yonge Street was converted into a pedestrian mall during summers in the 1970s. It started as a 2-week experiment in 1971, but it proved so well received, it was extended 11 weeks for the following 2 years. And then, like any good car-loving city, it was killed off. In fact, any attempt to pedestrianize this area or build bike lanes here gets strongly opposed by Cadillac Fairview, the owner of the Eaton Center. When you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous that there's bike lanes from Yonge and Bloor up to Yonge and Eglinton, or rather Yonge and Davisville. They do not extend south of Yonge and Bloor. There are plans to build them on a stretch of Yonge Street, but not continuously. Someone's Amazon package. There's the Elgin and Winter Garden. I think the last operating double-stack theater of its kind. Just north of it, there's also Massey Hall and the former Pantages Theater. So there's a lot of that kind of nightlife. Big theater productions on this stretch of Yonge Street. There's also a number of theaters over on King Street West. And here, Queen Street is closed for at least 4 years between Victoria Street to the left here and Bay Street to the right to make way for Ontario Line construction. But there's where Eaton's department store used to be before the Eaton Center was built. And over there, what is now Saks Fifth Avenue and the Bay used to be a Simpsons department store. And that dates back to the late 1890s. When Hudson's Bay took over Saks Fifth Avenue, they took part of the bay and reassigned it to Saks. I can't even remember the last time I bought something from a department store. And here's Richmond Street. So on the right here is the financial district. It's not a blatant red light run there. And just over here on the right at Temperance Street was the City of Toronto's first shopping mall. That was the Yonge Street Arcade. Or rather, I read that incorrectly, and I knew that too, because I've talked about this before. It was actually opposite of Yonge and Temperance, so that would have been right here on the left. Got ahead of myself. I don't normally read off of my phone as I go. I've been referencing that Blog TO article. We're at Adelaide Street. We'll look up at three of the tallest towers in the city. On the left, that tall red building is Scotia Plaza. In the center, the tallest building, First Canadian Place, that's the white one. And just to the right of that is the St. Regis, formerly the Trump Tower. That's me. Awesome. Just making a video now. All right, take care. Friendly viewer. And I'm a block away from what I think will be the final destination for this one, King Station, or at least King Street.
They're really good at bus. You guys go with them. Are you going with them? Let's go with them. Okay. We're not getting bored.
Jackie, are we taking the King streetcar?
And Yonge Street continues all the way down to the lake at Queens Quay. All right, here we go. We're at Yonge Street. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed this one, starting at Yonge and Bloor, heading south down Yonge Street. Spanning 6 subway stations. And there's the look north. And let me know your thoughts and comments down below. If you wish to support what I do on YouTube, there are links to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership down in the description. I have an Instagram account at Johnny Strides, and there is a super thanks button appearing below the video if you wish to say thanks that way. I'm gonna sign off and pop down into the subway, head back home, turn around, and go out again, as the TTC has made my timing a little tight on this one. Anywho, thank you for watching. And oh yeah, happy Thanksgiving long weekend. And I will catch you in the next one. Yoink.